I am joined by amazing folks, and we're going to be talking about the intersection of TTRPGs and mental wellness. Before we get into that, I want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Yeah, let's get into it.
Hello, I'm Dr. Megan Connell. I'm a psychologist and practice physically in Charlotte, North Carolina, but virtually in a bunch of other states. I'm also a therapeutic game master. I run games specifically for women and girls to learn self-advocacy, boundary setting, and just to improve self-esteem. I'm also the co-founder of a company called Geeks Like Us, where we are a community-based entertainment industry. And through Geeks Like Us, I'm the game master for an awesome show called Clinical Role, where it's all psychologists and other therapeutic game masters playing. We just wrapped up campaign 1 and we'll be starting campaign 2 in the fall. I'm also the host for the Brain Noodles podcast. I have helped to co-create a training for applied therapeutic game masters. And then I've also just recently finished a draft of a book that's going to hopefully be published sometime this year on the applied use of tabletop role-playing games. So, and then I do other stuff.
It's amazing that you had time to fit us in, and so thank you. Thank you, Dr. Megan, so much. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Dr. Jared Kilmer. I serve as the Director of Counseling Services at Game to Grow. I have been running therapeutically applied tabletop RPGs for the past 5 years amongst veteran populations, like foster youth populations. And right now I'm running groups with Game to Grow, primarily working with neurodivergent kids and adolescents.
Wow. You guys all have so much amazing work. Thank you very much for being on with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Adam Johns. I'm the founder and co-executive director for Game to Grow. So Game to Grow is a nonprofit 501c3 that uses games of all kinds for therapeutic, educational, and community growth. And we are most primarily well known for our Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game groups, building social capacity and building social competence within kids, teens, and adults. Although we actually do run Minecraft groups as well. We run a training program. We also are the developers for Critical Core, which is a take-home kit for parents and teachers and therapists, helping them to get started with this kind of work and get introduced into role-playing games if they've never played before. So very excited to be here and to be talking about all this stuff. And Megan, you're making me feel like I should have written down all the stuff I do, because you did such a good job. I know it's the sticky note.
The sticky note. Really, the sticky note wins.
Really, way better.
Well, Adam, we're super excited to have 2 folks from Game to Grow on stream with us. That is a fantastic organization that does some really great work. And yeah, thank you. And we have one other special guest with us here today.
Wait a minute.
I'm pointing the wrong way.
Hold on. Wait, this isn't my Saturday yoga class. I might have clicked the wrong Zoom link. I'm so glad I'm last, because that joke wouldn't have worked otherwise. Yeah, hi. Christopher Leach. I'm a PhD student over in the UK at Edge Hill University. I'm a second year. My PhD is in psychology, and I'm looking at video games and student mental health. I'm sort of new to TTRPG, sort of within the past 12 months, so a little bit of D&D 5e, and very recently sort of June Adventures in the Emporium. So really, really enjoying that. I'm sort of being a bit starstruck, being around all these fantastic people who I know and sort of know of through the interwebs. Alongside that, I do a whole host of other things. I stream. I'm a person with albinism, so I'm legally blind, severely sight impaired. And I kind of smash that together with my qualification to do my show Blind Psyche, because I think that's entertaining. So yeah, I do a podcast called Psych to Be With You. Sit down with great people, talk about what they do, but also why, which I think is something that we maybe don't necessarily tap into as much, and just have a whole sort of host of fun. I like to sort of frame it in the context of, doing a PhD is like starting a new game, and you do the tutorial section, and all I've done since I've started is subquests. It's really fun, and I'm going to be like super buffed when I get back to the main quest. I just haven't got there yet.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, we appreciate you taking a break from your university studies, your sub quests, side quests. Gosh, English shouldn't be this hard for me. It's technically my first language. Your side quests and everything else to be here with us. Thank you all so much. So we have a really kind of heavy topic here today, but it's relevant for a lot of folks. And One thing that I want to mention is that while we're talking about TTRPGs and mental wellness and mental health, it is important for us to remind everybody who's going to be watching now or who's on stream with us now and who will be watching later that we're not here and not able to diagnose or treat any mental or emotional health issues. So we're going to be talking more from everything from a theoretical sense to anecdotes and other things as we kind of explore this really emerging space. It's personally relevant for a lot of people. You know, I like to try to remind myself all the time that I never know where someone else is coming from. We can't look at someone and understand what they've been through, what obstacles they've overcome to get here. And so to that end, I'm going to share something a little bit personal. So for folks, there might be a little bit of a content warning here. I'm not going to get into anything, you know, too crazy, but we will talk about abuse a little bit. So my personal journey, I grew up extremely poor. My mom is intellectually disabled. My stepdad was a drug dealer. I dealt with an array of repeated abuse as I was growing up. You know, basically every kind of abuse. I spent about a year homeless when I was 13, and obviously these traumas affect you affected me whether or not I realized that or not. I was very lucky in that I was fortunate enough to get some counseling in high school and have had counseling and therapy since then to help kind of come to terms with my traumas, as well as how they affected different coping strategies and affected how I related to people differently. For me personally, TTRPGs were amazing because my first experience with them, I got to be with a great group of people in a situation where I didn't have to imagine myself as socially isolated as I thought I was. The pieces of my past and identity, such as being Latino, being really poor, being dirty, you know, having had really bad experiences, those I was able to set aside as I got to experiment with different identities and intersect with people in a really low pressure way that was just about us co-creating stories. So that was my experience. There was no therapy or anything involved with that, but it was a very freeing experience and allowed me and kind of kicked off my love of gaming and TTRPGs because it was so freeing. So I'd love to kick it back to you folks and kind of get your thoughts about kind of broadly where some of these intersections between mental health, mental wellness, and TTRPGs lay.
So I think it'd be really good if we maybe sort of start with like a definition. I kind of, you know, obviously this can be different. I'm in the UK, so maybe legislatively it's a little bit different. But even like the way we frame mental health is really important. And I say this, I'm connected with Take This, a US-based American mental health charity that caters to the game players, streamers, content creators, and game designers, the game industry, and Safe in Our World, which does a similar role over here in the UK. And one of the big things is just having that conversation and talking about like mental health in itself. And particularly my work and my research, one of the things I think is good to frame it as mental health. If we run a parallel to physical health, you know, we say, well, mental health is something we all have, we all experience it all the time. We have moments where maybe we have ill mental health, where our mental health is less well, where it's not, you know, maybe in top condition. And that's kind of like my operational definition, if you will. I think it's reflective of like my lived experiences with moments that have been less great and really challenging, as well as being a person with a disability. I think that has an impact as well. But just want to sort of toss the ball out there just to, you know, how do we define it, this construct?
That's a great point. I'd love. Dr. Megan, do you mind hopping in first?
Yeah, there's I think like Chris, you just opened up like Pandora's box there, right? Because like, what the heck is health? Right?
Chaos.
You know,
chaos.
yeah, and it's a really interesting thing because like I started my journey as a psychologist. I was in the military, and like we would do these like weeks of health. And like it's like day 1, heart health, which is all about heart attacks. And day 2, lung health, which is all about why you shouldn't smoke. It's like this isn't a week of health. This is a week of illness. You know, we're not really talking about like how do we facilitate, how do we build up health, how do we create healthy interactions with other people. And so I think when we're talking about mental health, it's not about always feeling good. Like again, like to that point of definitions, in therapist speak, one of the important things is how we understand the world, how we conceptualize things. And so the style of therapy I use doesn't conceptualize mental health as a lack of symptoms. Being mentally healthy is being able to engage with your life in meaningful ways, even if you feel like crap. So it's sort of like, even if you're super anxious, can you still get in front of the camera and talk to people and tell them about what you do? Or if you're really depressed, can you still get out of bed and be with your family because you really value spending time with your family? And so it's sort of thinking through, those different aspects of it. And tabletop role-playing games, I have found to be a wonderful way to bring all of that together, because it's this place where maybe me as a player, I have no energy, or I can't be as physically fit as my player or my player character, but I get a chance to see my player character do amazing feats and to kind of still feel that victory. I've been reading some interesting studies that are suggesting that even just role playing out and speaking role playing, not LARPing, the actions of our characters, it actually integrates memories and in a way that is very similar to autobiographical memory. That's big doctor speak for what we play in the game seems to actually create memories like us as a person. And so it allows us to have these times where we can engage in life in a meaningful way that we maybe don't feel like we can day to day.
We often talk about that exact concept, that sort of displacement. And this is what you were talking about too, Jamie, which is that space of where you are and where your character is, and the value or the sometimes just the opportunity that it presents for you to be somebody else, for you to experience something different from where you're usually at. And that space is so interesting, especially in the world of RPGs, because largely it's self-determined. You get to decide how much space you want to have. There's lots of players who play a character that's basically just me in this adventuring world, or something along those lines, or it's me with a fancy hat, or it's me with big muscles or whatever, but every other aspect of it is just me. And then there's also players who play characters that are hugely opposite. They're hugely different from who I am as a person in very specific or in very pointed ways. And that space that you create there is a huge part of it's a huge part of the sort of applied RPG, therapeutically applied RPG model, but it's also a huge part of the I think, appeal for a lot of people playing RPGs. And certainly it's a huge opportunity for anybody who, like Megan said, is struggling with where they're at. And this space, the discussion of mental health, is right in that area. I want to say that like mental wellness is like an attempt to rebrand, maybe in a positive way, like mental health as an overall, to think about it positively and to think about the space that you are as having a positive perspective. It's not about always the challenge that I have, although I can't ignore those things. Those play an important role within my life. And sometimes being able to step aside from those, or being able to experience a different perspective or a different opportunity, can be a really important way that I engage with that.
To piggyback on some of these ideas, Adam, you talked about like person A may just want to be like fantasy themselves, and person B may want to be very different. But also these are like very dynamic motivations that can change for a single individual over time. This year, I might want to be fantasy Jared in my game, and next year I might really want to push myself, or vice versa. And I really like, Chris, how you were starting to talk about some of the normalization of mental health and bringing that up into people's awareness and like just the general discussion. We often talk about it as if it was some kind of deficit to be fixed, but the broad range of what health is really, really going to use broad again, just because that's the simplest in this moment. But when I think about mental health, it's not just like clinical diagnoses. It's also, are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Like, what's going on in this moment? A bad night of sleep impacts mental health and is worth discussion. Just as
Being
much.
hungry is mental health, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so like I like to bring those basic needs kind of questions around mental health into my games all the time, just gaining insight into like, where are we in this moment? Where are our peers around the table? How might sharing some of that information, like how many of us are hungry right now or tired right now, just to gain some perspective from the other players at the table. I'm getting kind of rambly. I apologize.
I think that's actually good to talk about, Jared, because like the idea, especially of the check-in of the you know, including space of how is everybody doing today? You know, what is the what's the feel that everybody has as they're sitting down at the table? And obviously we do a lot of this when we're running applied groups. I know Megan, you do a lot of check-in. You do a lot of making sure that your players are in a comfortable space, or that you're aware of whatever challenges they may be bringing in that day, and we do too, and that's very, very important. But honestly, that's something that's just good human connection. That's good opportunity to just say, like, I want to be aware of where you're at. You're tired today. You've had a rough night's sleep. I want to know that. And then if you're short with me, or you're you know, maybe not as jovial as you usually are, I can have better understanding of the place that you may be at. I think that's just a valuable way for us to continue to connect with each other as people.
I think it's also good modeling behavior. Like it's, you know, it took me a while to recognize that the experiences that I've had, the variety of experiences, while other people haven't had the same experiences, some of them were not unique to me. You know, there are other people who've had other experiences that are also traumatic or have been obstacles, you know, and there is a value in understanding that other people also sometimes struggle with mental health, that they struggle with mental wellness, that they struggle with self-care or being self-aware of certain things. You know, I've applied some of these things personally. So I'm in a leadership role with my team, and I let people know, like, I will let my team know I'm under a lot of pressure this week. If I'm short with you, this is why, and you can let me know that I'm short with you or that I hurt your feelings. You know, you have that permission to do that. And if we can take that into the TTRPG space as well, that's fantastic. I mean, I would definitely welcome that.
I want to take that a step further, even, Jamie, and say not only is that great to do, but it's also great to ask for what you need. It's also great to say like, I'm having a hard week. If anybody can give me a little positive feedback, if anybody can give me a little bump, you know, that would mean a lot to me. That would help me in my place that I'm at right now. And that's great. I want people to ask for what they need, to ask for what they want, especially from that emotional perspective, or that, you know, I'm having a challenge today, and that gives that clear direction of how people can support you.
I think that
I feel
needs to
like
be. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Okay, so I was gonna say, like, I also want to point out that I'm not saying my definition was correct. I'm just saying that's like the one that I kind of apply, right? But I think what we're kind of getting at here is, and I'm aware of kicking another hornet's nest with this one, but like, is empathy, right? Whether you're using that as a skill or just saying it's something that we should all have. And there's, I mean, I've had to do it for my PhD, but like defining that's really difficult. There's so many different strands you can pick up. But quintessentially, you know, people want to be heard, right? And if you even just giving people the space to say, oh, I'm listening, can do so much, because you go, oh, and then you can say, oh yeah, well, you're not saying I understand exactly how you feel. I'm not trying to apply that to anything. I'm listening, and I'm willing to respect how you feel. Can just be huge for people. I also wanted to pick up as well when we talk about, so I mentioned I'm new to TTRPGs. The first character I picked up in D&D was the complete opposite of myself. Person with albinism, visually impaired, so I went rogue, half orc, sharpshooter, who didn't speak, was like edgelordy stoic, because I often am too outspoken. So I just picked myself and went the other way entirely and ran with that. The not speaking bit didn't really last because I then got really into the game. But like, yeah, my character was an absolute like boss. you had stealth round and then just sharpshoot and get crits. It was like absolutely fantastic. And then the second time, I'm actually doing a Take This inspired Psychomancer cleric in Wild by the Witchlight, which is super fun. And even then, like playing a character that is like has a strong faith. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a spiritual person more than a particularly sort of religious person, but like even someone who doesn't necessarily always have faith in themselves, playing this character that just has this definitive faith that everything will work out. And I was like, I'm really sort of putting a bit of myself into this character, which is why my intelligence is in a negative. Really embodying that. But it, as someone that was so new to it and has played it in adulthood and sort of always been interested, it's so funny how the points that you all are pulling out so succinctly are so true, even just to me picking it up and playing it casually with no other additional thought. I honestly do think being visually impaired is one of the reasons why I was like, right, a character with 60-foot dart vision, let's go. I'm going to roll a perception roll. I can see everything because that's not something I can do in the real world.
I imagine, especially with the sharpshooter aspect that you included in that, right?
Yep.
I want to, Jared, you were about to bridge onto something that Adam said as he was talking about kind of empathy and empathy at the table. So I want to give you the space for that. And then Megan, Dr. Megan, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of these discussion points.
I think I just wanted to validate, we were talking about the ability to practice asking for what you need, gaining perspective, showing empathy. And I just wanted to voice, these are not things you just flip on. You don't just start doing these things. These are skills. These are all easier said than done. And these spaces allow a really approachable scenario to practice, maybe get it wrong, try it again in moments or next time, but like with repeated exposure. And one of the things I like most about tabletop RPGs is it's just an experience mill. Like it's just a lot of scenarios over and over and over again that can allow us like infinite possibility to like try new things from different angles.
Yeah. Well, and to the end of like empathy building, that seems to be one of the keys, so, I think all of us who run games, like a lot of our players end up being people who are on the autism spectrum, and theory of mind and building empathy skills is one of the challenges. And so how do we teach that in a way that feels organic? And there's a lot of research around literature that shows when you read books, it actually helps to build your empathy because you are completely immersing yourself into the experience of another person. And the more you identify with a character, the greater the growth of empathy will be. And so while research is lacking, it really stands to reason that a character that you create and you feel very emotionally connected to because you are playing them would help to not only grow your empathy, and I'm guessing it would grow it and develop it more than happens in literature, but we don't know. But it does stand to reason that there's good science behind playing and engaging with characters is a way for us to grow and to develop skills in empathy.
Dr. Megan, it's funny you should point that out because someone might be researching that type of thing in relation to video game characters experiencing ill mental health. So I'm just going to put that down there. But that is like the very nexus of what I'm kind of looking at. Like, what is the impact of playing these characters? Does that make a difference? And why might that be? So I'm just going to shout out one of my favorite papers by Ariane Fauchot. It's French, so I've just absolutely butchered the pronunciation of that. Dr. Ariane Fauchot et al., who they performed a study on Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice and got some people to play it and then some people to watch that gameplay and compared their attitudes towards people experiencing ill mental health before and after. And the people that played the game showed a greater increase in sort of in empathetic attitudes or a decrease in negative attitudes. I can't remember exactly how it's framed. I've read too many papers. And even those that watched it had a slight change. So just interacting with something that deliberately was framed in the context of this is what this is like, change people's perspectives. And you can do that as well. I think, the way I kind of describe TTRPGs to my gaming, video game friends is it's a video game, but you do all the dialogue. So you're even further invested, there's even more involvement as you as an individual.
I also think there's something really important to the space of TTRPGs as far as making choice for who your character is. Mm-hmm. And the one of the interesting things that I think, so obviously lots of video games give you opportunity to change how your character looks, to choose how your character dresses. And those pieces are really important. There is a really strange and maybe very unique space that role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games provide, which is that every time I do those dialogue pieces, I have to make little choices about my character. Every time I decide like what is my character's response to this, even when they're like little catchphrases or a joke or something like that. When I say this is what my character says, I have to put little choices in to dictate and to move my character around. Christopher, you said like your character eventually stopped being like stoic and stopped talking or stopped being so quiet because it was a part of who you are, and you got excited about like being able to play and getting deeper into the character. And I think that's an important thing. Your character is gonna shape and change. The definition of who your character is gonna change over time. And it's rarely, if ever, the actual definition you started off with. You might have had this very clear idea of who your character was, but when you actually have to play it, when you actually have to sometimes embody or speak as those pieces, you have to make many choices about the input that your character gets from yourself. And we talk a lot about the way that it's impossible to make a character that's not a reflection of yourself. It might be opposite. It might be, you with a hat, you trying to get a fancy hat and dreaming about it someday. Obviously I have some challenges with hats. But like whatever the case may be, it's always a little bit of who you are that comes into the character that you create. And I think that's just a rich, valuable place to be able to work from.
I'm so
Well,
glad you said
I
that,
was-
Adam. Oh, I'm sorry, Megan. Go ahead.
Just really quick, like I think a really fun question to ask people who have been playing TTRPGs for a while is just like, and they're like, oh no, all my characters are vastly different. They don't reflect anything in me. It's like, cool. Imagine an adventuring party made up of nothing but your characters. And they all eventually go, oh.
What a good question, too. I love that. I'm now imagining all of my characters. What a mess of an adventuring
Oh,
party
God.
that would be.
I was giving a talk at Gamehole Con, and so everybody in the audience, it was like, veteran players. And like when I asked that question, everyone in the audience was like, oh, and pretty much some people were like, oh God, they wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah, my party would be pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you, Adam, for adding that second piece, like the other side of the coin, for all the choice we have in character development. I wanted to highlight all the lack of choice we have in character development too. Every choice we make seems to be a reflection of us, even when we're trying to go the opposite route of who we think we are. It's based off of what we think we are.
Oh man, that is so true. I can't tell you how many players I've had in games who go, I want to play like a serious brooding character and then like crack jokes the whole time. Or vice versa, or players who go like, I want to play the charismatic, face character, but who have a lot of trouble speaking up, who have a lot of trouble finding their words in the moment, and who sometimes, for better, for worse, usually because I want to help them, encourage them into that space, really struggle to step into that role and to be that character. And that is a real challenge. It's sometimes really hard to play the character you want to play in the moment. And that's maybe a great area of growth for you to aim for.
Yeah. Well, and that's where like talking process is so important. So like there's this really interesting thing of like, when you watch those of us who run the therapeutic games, run our games, for the most part, it's not going to look any different from a game that you're going to see, except for sometimes we're going to stop and process and talk about what's going on here, and being able to say things like, wow, my character would really know what to say, or my character would have an idea of what's going on here, but I as a player don't. It's like, okay, so let's talk about like how that feels when we're in situations where we don't know what's going on. And like, oh, by the way, your character has the advantage of all these voices in their head, which is everybody else around the table. So let's take a pause, let's talk and process what's going on right now. And it's, in the style of therapy that I do, one of the big things is talking about turning towards the fear. That our fears, often like anxiety, it's basically like the big shadow on the wall. And what we see is the big shadow, which is the big what if, right? But when we turn around and face the thing that's actually making the fear, a lot of times it's not all that big. And so that can be something that we can, teach people and practice doing in the role-playing setting of like turn around. It's like, okay, it's, oh my God, what if there's a monster in here? What if this is happening? What if that's happening? It's like, okay, well, whoa, let's turn around. What actually is right now? What is the fear that we have? And it's really fascinating when we can do that.
We got any June fans in the house? Because I'm just like the litany of fear just went through my brain. Like just that like little thing of like fear is the mind killer. I will let it wash over me and all it will remain is me. Like that is just like really pertinent. I think another thing I want to sort of jump in there, and I bang on about accessibility a lot because it's important. But one of the things that I think one of the bridges that we still need to sort of cross, even in a lot of media, just media all, including TTRPGs, is accessibility. You know what I mean? Like, could I play like a person with albinism in D&D? It's not necessarily in the core rulebook. Are there aids and things for people that need additional sort of items? And there are great people. I was literally speaking to Jennifer Kretschner yesterday. She's absolutely fantastic, and she's done loads of great work in the D&D universe. Absolutely, you know, Jen is incredible. But like even like that, like developing that, it's maybe more there in TTRPGs than it is anywhere else. And that's really important so that you can be in there no matter who you are, even however far your imagination wants to run, but you can still do that.
I think that representation piece is just this incredibly important piece. And actually, I think it's an area that, in general, the community of role playing is still finding their feet in, which is finding comfort in that, or finding the area where you can go to a table in a game store and find a willingness to have representation in your games, which is just a hugely important area. It's a hugely important part that we want to make sure that we're continuing to encourage in the community, is inclusivity and representation and inside of role-playing games. And
the community is great. I mean, I know like another, I'm going to name drop again, but like Blind Temple is great stuff. And like, you know, when I first started D&D, I was like straight up with the GM. I was like, look, I'm visually impaired. What character sheets are not super friendly. And they went away and were able to find really, like they said, it took them seconds, but a large print character sheet that was so much more accessible. So there we go, I was right in the game, no problem. And that was something they didn't have to do. I was willing to do it myself, but they just did it because it was there, because the community facilitated that. And that's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah. I love the parts of the community that really come together and welcome more people in and welcome more people to be a part of this, which is the space I love here.
Yeah, I do agree that representation matters. It's critical because the media, because I think we've all kind of talked about essentially in one form or another that, you know, TTRPGs, gaming is a form of media that we're consuming, and how we see ourselves in the media that we consume affects how we see ourselves in the world and our place in that world. But I kind of want to, we've only touched a little bit on, we've been talking a lot about some of these intersections. Now, again, I just want to remind everybody that, you know, the folks that we have on are experienced, you know, Dr. Kilmer and Dr. Jared and Dr. Megan are both licensed. So, you know, they can actually conduct therapy. Christopher is working on his PhD. So when I'd love to chat about some techniques and how you guys use, you know, TTRPGs in therapy. But before we do that, I just, again, want to caution and let folks know that these are professionals who are trained, who are using these techniques. And we're not advocating the use of these techniques in your games. And we're not advocating that you're diagnosing or helping to treat people. And we understand that people sometimes want to help their friends. It comes from a good place, but it's really important. You would not treat a broken bone if you were not a trained physician. Similarly, we should not try to treat, you know, mental health and emotional health issues. But I'll turn it back over to the group and Dr. Megan.
Well, yeah, one quick thing I was going to say with that is like one of the biggest things we have is we have consent, right? Like our players are coming in knowing it's therapy. And it's how I set up the whole game in session 0 is like, this is therapy. We are going to talk about some difficult topics. We're going to have no-go topics like that. I'm going to respect your boundaries. There are going to be times though where we're uncomfortable because that helps us grow and that helps us develop. But we create consent. I use safety tools. We have all kinds of measures in place, but it is very explicit about what we're doing.
And to take that just one step further, and thank you for saying that, Megan, don't do therapy on your friends. That's kind of the bottom line we're trying to say here. We're licensed professionals and we do it in a very specific context. We're not doing therapy on our friends either, just because we might be capable of it. we don't want that dual relationship, and I don't think your friendship wants that either.
Mm-mm.
It's almost
Oh.
like a psychology trope, isn't it? Sorry, Adam, but like,
No,
you're
go
like
ahead.
you do a little bit of psychology, and you're like, right, what can I do with this? And that's no, don't do that. I also think as well, like it's funny we talk about consent because again, like as someone who's really new, I've like read the PHB cover to cover. I've read the core rulebook for like June as well, and like in their game mastering section, they have a huge section on like consent and gaming content. I just thought that was like a really nice bit to see, like in the core rulebook, and then saying when you're playing the game, this is really important. Don't stray from this. Like really key part of the game.
You know, sometimes I think especially if you're not a therapist, if you're not a psychologist, sometimes it's hard to understand what it is to be doing therapy or not be doing therapy, and it's hard to understand how you may or may not be drifting into those roles. And a lot of times I use the everybody sort of knows what therapy looks like. You're sitting on a couch, you're talking to somebody in a very traditional sense, but that's sort of the parallel that I like to use. You can be a good friend. You can be supportive of your friend who might be having a hard time. You can be there listening to them. You can be there, you know, even in the space of saying like, I want to help, you know, I'm your friend. How can I help you? All of those things those are things that good friends do. The difference between you sitting and listening to your friend and somebody sitting and listening in a therapeutic context is oftentimes it's the training, obviously, but it's also the understanding of why you're both there. It's that agreed upon contract that is that space, and that is a lot of what that space needs to be. So it's okay. I mean, we can even talk a lot about safety tools, about consent, about all those things. You should have those in your games. Those, we're not telling you don't do those because you're not a therapist. Definitely do. Please do those things.
Yeah.
In your personal games. The extra space there is to not try to have a contract where you're trying to fix your friend. It is about you can have a space where you're being supportive and where you are being aware and helpful to the challenges that your friends might be bringing in, without trying to do therapy on them.
So
Well,
I feel like I've got to. Sorry, Meg. Go on.
Oh, what I was going to say is what you're talking about there, Adam, really, it's boundary setting,
It is
right?
boundary
It's
setting,
having those appropriate boundaries. And like, I think it's really important too that GMs have boundary, you know, like boundaries of like, I'm not your therapist kind of thing, you know, with your players, but also like GMs are allowed to have their own boundaries because sometimes players will come and be like, you know, I really want to explore this thing that I'm thinking of in my life. And it's okay for the GM to go, I am super uncomfortable with that happening in the game. Because like it's supposed to be fun for the GM too. And thinking about that, you know, and if like a player comes who has bad trauma and is like, I want to like face my trauma in your game, it's like, I am not equipped to deal with that. So let's maybe talk about how can we find you maybe your own therapeutic game to play in, or a therapist that you can work on this stuff with. But like I'm not comfortable with that happening in the game. Like not the thing of like I'm not comfortable with you, but like I don't know what's going to happen as you explore this thing, and I don't know what that's going to look like.
May I respond to that to get in
Yeah.
the way of Chris's comment? Is that okay, Chris?
I was gonna like attempt to say that, but not as well. So it's fine.
Well, Megan, I love what you're saying. Even when it is like a formal, like therapy group for individuals that have all experienced the trauma and may have a diagnosis of PTSD, I still try to make it very clear we're not here to talk about the events that led up to or occurred during the trauma. If we're going to process trauma at that level, I really recommend an individual therapist. What we're going to do is maybe work on some of the residual effects of that trauma. There are symptoms you might be experiencing right now, fear or impulsivity, for example. Those are things we can target and work on in group much more transparently and like without necessarily being triggering to other people at the table.
Yeah. And I think like we've talked about this, but I want to take a quick moment too. We've talked about safety tools and mentioned that, but without saying what that, you know, as Chris put it at the beginning, we haven't said what they are. So a safety tool is basically a rule set that you have at your table that allows the game to be paused and to pivot away from topics that are unsettling or unnerving to people, or even it might, for those with trauma history, might even be triggering of their trauma. The hope is that you create some lists of go and no go topics before you start, but that the safety tools are in place, because sometimes games wander into places that we didn't imagine would be in the game or would be traumatic, and it can just be hard. And so you want to have that agreed upon rule set that will pause the game and allow the narration to pivot without it completely breaking the narrative of the game.
I often think of safety tools as, it's not like you couldn't necessarily speak up and say like, I don't like where this is going, but sometimes in the context of like you're playing through the game, everybody seems to be having a fun time, it can be really challenging to find your voice in that moment, and especially if you are feeling in any way emotionally overwhelmed by the circumstances that are happening. So a lot of the time safety tools are designed to be an opportunity for you to express what's going on for you, express how you're being overwhelmed without having to actually say it out loud. So many of the tools are ones that you can do with a nonverbal movement, or type something into a chat room, or flip a card over, or anything like that, where you can do those things. You can recognize that you're overwhelmed. You can give a signal to your group, and everybody has an understanding of what that signal means. And that's really what a lot of those tools are really sort of centered around.
It's really lovely to have a system in place for that, because sometimes you can feel like, I know exactly the territory I don't want to go. And I am less than 100% confident that we're going in that direction, but it seems like we might be going in that direction. And should I put the brakes on now or later? I'm not sure where we are yet. So like when you start getting that sense internally, it's great to have an understood way to engage and bring it up.
So I want to, we talked a lot about quite a variety of topics, and you know, safety, the definitions of mental health, mental wellness. You know, we've gotten a little bit into some of the strategies and stuff that are used, or how TTRPGs are used. I'd love, if you guys are comfortable, obviously we want to talk in general terms, but where have you guys seen successes, or how have you seen TTRPGs positively impacting individuals in these things, whether from your own personal perspective or what you've observed?
So a lot of the participants in Game to Grow groups, at least historically, have been especially kids and teens. You know, we see a lot of middle school age or early high school in our groups, and a vast majority of them are socially isolated, have difficulty building social connections, have difficulty with their social capacity, and one of the most important things that we see a lot of is a lack of intrinsic appreciation for socialization. So we see so many players who really just don't understand why having a social network is important, why it's important to have friends, because they've never had them. They've never had a chance to have like a close friend or a close relationship in any way. They're often bullied in school. They really just have struggled to find any reason for that. They play a lot of like solo video games, and they play, you know, they maybe talk to their family, and that's about it. And the real successes, my favorite successes, are the players that have come in. I had one player we've been working with for a long, long time, and when they first came into the group, they couldn't even withstand. We have a check-in question at the beginning of every session. They couldn't even withstand the idea that somebody had a different opinion than them in the check-in question, and they would like get up out of their chair and like kick at the person, not in like a really harmful, violent way, but like as their only expression of like, I disagree with you. They would like kick at somebody else in the chair, just to sort of express like you're wrong. And over the years that we've been working with them, they have now developed strong friendships. They now attend, you know, they go to birthday parties and go to events with the players that they've had in groups. They have said that this group is their third place, meaning it's their home and their school or their work are sort of the concepts of the two places where you often are, and the third place is the place that's not those things, but where you feel so comfortable, where you feel so at home, that it is the place that you really appreciate and really means a lot to you. So that moment where they expressed that it just meant so much to me, and it was such a perfect expression to their journey, that they had finally like really found the value in what these friendships, what these relationships could really mean for them.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like legitimately, I'm about to tear up. So this is a perfect moment for me. I don't want to distract from the conversation. I have a prior engagement. For those who know, I also teach Kung Fu at the university. And while I normally have a student instructor who comes in, and so I can be late, I can't be late this time. So I'm going to step out. D&D Jordan Leah is going to step in as our host, and I'd love for you guys to kind of continue this chat. But I'm going to say goodbye. I won't pop off screen until D&D Jordan Leah has replaced me, but I do want to personally say thank you to our amazing guests. You will have an opportunity for an outro. The stream is not over for those who are watching. I'm just stepping away. The amazing guests, our stars, are still here. So please continue on with the conversation. Dr. Megan, it looked like you had something that you wanted to share in that vein.
Yeah, I've shared a bunch of stories from mine, but I think the one that stands out to me the most, so we know like research on how women are raised in American culture is to be unsupportive of one another and to be backstabbing. And it's called the queen bee mentality, essentially. And it's cultural. It's not how it's like not a biological thing. It is something how we are taught. And so one of the goals of my group is for women to learn how to build positive social interactions with one another. And so I had a feedback session with a parent, and he was telling me that he's like, well, I see my daughter with her friends from school, and I see her with her D&D friends. And her friends from school, it's a lot of backhanded compliments, a lot of tearing each other down, a lot of gossip. And when she's with her D&D friends, they are laughing, they are joking, they're being supportive of one another, they're celebrating each other's victories. He's like, and he just looked, he's like, I want all her friends to be D&D friends. I was like, yes, we got this. We're going, it's going in the right direction. So I think for me, that's like one of the biggest victories I've seen.
What I love about that one, Megan, is you've heard Adam and I, Adam Davis and I talk a lot about like we wish the world would play role-playing games together. Like people who are enemies, I want them to sit down at a table and play D&D and have to be on a team and have to work together and have to do that. And that story is like just such a perfect like you can be together. Like look at how great you can be if you just work together and play at a table together. It just means so much. That's so good.
I love what happens when we have a superordinate goal for opposing parties to work together for. Yeah.
I definitely have to agree. I think that Megan, or Dr. Megan, rather, your story really touches home for me just because I kind of had a similar experience growing up where, being a girl in school can be really, really hard sometimes, but having that space where, hey, we are all coming together and telling a story and we're kind of overcoming metaphorical demons or dragons or whatever it may be. Honestly, I think was really enriching to kind of break down those barriers of, oh, hey, we're not all that different. We all are struggling with a lot of similarities. So no, it definitely, definitely touches home. I'm fixing the overlay, y'all. I do apologize. It will be updated shortly. I'm just getting everything situated.
I mean, I think I kind of wish I had anything to say about this, but obviously, not a very new to TTRPGs and not a therapist. So I have no success stories other than just me really enjoying it. But I think, you can't turn off that psychology brain. I think even from my brief experiences with it, like you're here to say that, yeah, we've seen the application. I think like just from experiencing the games, I can really see the application, like the potential for that as well. And I think it's something that just more people should do. I know we were just saying like if everyone just played a bit of D&D, like that just sort everything out. You know what I mean? Just get together, have a laugh. It's all good, all gravy.
My brief story that comes to mind, everything Adam shared about the experiences of Game to Grow resonates with me. But like what jumps to my mind first is when I was running a group at the VA hospital with veterans who've experienced severe mental illness, and they may be like currently engaged in like an amount of treatment that's like a part-time job. They're kind of out of the workforce at that moment. And I was working with an individual who just wanted to play a supportive cleric and kind of be quiet in the group and like gain some of that like camaraderie and just like being around people, greasing those wheels. And they did a great job at that. But there was a few moments where half of the group was unable to show up for different reasons. So like a group of 6 becomes a group of 2 or 3. And this individual who was like most comfortable being quiet and supportive in the back just didn't really have an opportunity to continue being quiet. There was a need for leadership and a need to speak up. And after several sessions kind of peppered here and there of gaining that exposure and that experience, you can see their voice growing, them being more bold, being more comfortable telling others what they think and what they hope. And through like that experience and the opportunity to process that and talk about what we're observing and what we're noticing and the differences they're seeing in themselves, they started voicing increased confidence and decreased comfort in being where they are. They wanted to start applying for better jobs that had greater responsibilities and more leadership roles. The end of this story is that they started applying and got those jobs and voiced being like so much happier and more confident in their day-to-day lives, and blaming a lot of that on just the opportunities they gained through play.
I feel like Dr. Megan, was it you who said like the parallel of the research shows the parallel of the skills that you build in the game versus the skills you have in real life? And I feel like that's such a great, that like Jared's story is like such a great expression of that. It's that perfect space of what role-playing games can do, where you can test a little of the water. It feels safer. You know, you're playing a character. It's not even really you who's like getting to try those things out. And if it goes poorly, like, you know, maybe you can rewind it, or it goes poorly and it's okay because it's a game, and it's not the end of the world. You have this space, you have this safety net to be able to try those things out, but you still get to have the experience. You still have the autobiographical. I think that was what you said, was autobiographical experience. Like, that's so important there.
Well, and what's interesting too is I read a study where so, you know, those of us who've gone through, you know, our different training programs, right? Do you remember role playing in the class? Like, who wants to role play the client today, and who wants to role play the therapist, right? Oh, it's awful, right? But a psychology professor actually decided to do something a little different, and they took techniques from film school, and they had the group go through character building, and they created a prototype client, and they named them, they gave them a history, some little character quirks. And anytime they did a therapy role play, the person who was the client was playing that character that the class had built. And he was like, my class was more engaged. People were willing to role play. They weren't as hesitant to jump in and say like this. And like the implication of that is humongous of like, okay, so like having that avatar, having that, you know, stand-in for us can be a powerful tool to make role playing that much better. You know, like in the military, we used role play all the time. And the idea of like getting handed a character sheet and like, this isn't going to be you screwing up a decision. You're going to be playing Captain Jones today. You're not Captain Connell or Major Connell. You're Captain Jones. And Captain Jones tends to think this way and tends to make decisions based off of this stuff. And let's see what Captain Jones does. And so like, rather than it being you, it's that character. And so there's a lot less risk.
I think to add like a little bit, like going like the other way. So I was teaching a class just this week, and we were talking about employability profiles. And there's this huge booklet that students have to go out and fill. And I was like, it really reminded me of a D&D character sheet. You pick your values, your top 3 values, your skills, what areas could you improve on. I physically made that comparison. I was like, this is you, but think about the you that, like, what goals are you reaching for? Who do you want to be in 5 years? That awful job interview question. But like, you know, think of it like that. And I saw a few of the students like light up when they sort of thought of it in that way. Like, it was like, okay, you're kind of using numbers and ticking boxes, but this is like you're doing it in a document. So the document is sort of the safer space. So you don't have to worry about it being you right now. This isn't like a do it tomorrow, but it's a just try and get, you know, the aspirational thinking, I guess, that thinking of being not just you right now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely agree with that.
That was me attempting to join in a conversation I have no right to be in.
I think you're here. I think you're doing a great job.
You got this.
Yeah, you're on top of it.
You are 100% on topic, and I really do appreciate it. And it is unfortunately getting to the end of our time here. So I think now is a perfect time to, tell everybody where we can find you, who you are, what you're up to, and where we can support all the fantastic things that you are doing. Let's start in reverse order on the overlay. Let's start with Christopher.
Oh, okay. What was the question? What am I doing?
Who are
Where?
you? What are you doing? Where can we find and support all the fantastic things you're doing?
Right. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So Christopher Leach, Chris Leach, whatever. I'm a PhD researcher doing video games, mental health. I also do some streaming and stuff on the side. Blind Psyche, host a podcast. If you find me on Twitter at Chris L Psych, Chris L CHRISL PSYCH. I think I just spelled that right. Probably not. I do that. I'm very bad at spelling. You'll find me there. All the other links to everything else is there. I'm going to be at PAX East this year. I've got a few panels on there. So if you're there, say hi. Remember, I am visually impaired, so I probably won't see you before you see me. That's fine. Just shout and wave frantically, and then I'll be able to identify you. But that's it.
Awesome.
I'm filibustering.
Thank you so much.
I'm Adam Johns. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Johns. I was an early Twitter adapter. And you can also find my company Game to Grow at Game To Grow on Twitter, and we do have trainings and offerings, but we also love to just have support, hear about stories of people having success in the work that they're doing, or personal stories of the successes you've had and the way that role-playing games or other games have positively impacted you. So always feel free to reach out with all those things. We love hearing that stuff too.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam.
Dr. Jared Kilmer. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, you were good.
Okay. I am the Director of Counseling Services at Game to Grow. Adam did not mention that you can also find us at gametoggrow.org. If you need to reach out to me directly, you can find me at Jared Kilmer on Twitter, as well as my joint professional account with my clinical psychologist wife at Doctors Kilmer, also on Twitter.
And I'm Dr. Megan Connell. You can find me on Twitter at Megan Psyd, MEGAN PSYD. That is also my website. That's where I talk about all the different things that I do, both professionally and clinically. And then also through Geeks Like Us, we stream on Twitch under at Geeks Like Us, but the E's and Geeks are 3s because we're from the 90s.
I like how that, like, all the E's and Geeks are 3s because we're from the 90s is like a
yeah. Oh, it's Ionic Pentameter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Shakespearean. I did it.
Love it. Thank you all so much. This has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. And honestly, I could sit here and chat for another 4 hours about it just because this is something that I deeply care about. But thank you all so much. Please take a moment I did post the links in chat to where you can go find and support all of the endeavors of our fantastic adventurers for today's topic. So thank you so much. Keep an eye on our Twitters for Be Never Ending. We'll announce when our next show is. But we're going to go ahead and throw a raid over to Unmade Gaming. They're live now with a TTRPG. But thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.